Have you ever felt unshakably safe, yet strangely empty? In a world where every need is met before it even surfaces, comfort becomes a silent adversary. We live amid soft cushions and constant connectivity, our days measured not by effort but by ease. Generations before us wrestled with famine, waged wars, carved homesteads from wilderness, and from that crucible emerged resilience, innovation, purpose. Today, we recline on couches that cradle our bodies, scroll through endless feeds that cradle our minds, and summon warm meals with the tap of a finger. But what happens when struggle vanishes from our daily lives? When challenges are outsourced to apps and algorithms, our inner grit atrophies. We begin to confuse convenience for progress, distraction for fulfillment. The pioneers who once braved harsh frontiers are reduced to pixelated relics on museum walls, reminders of a vigor we've traded for comfort. And comfort, when left unchecked, breeds complacency. This is the paradox at the heart of our age. The very prosperity we prize may be the architect of our decay. Good times create weak men, not because strength is born only of suffering, but because without pressure, metal never hardens. Each era's lull lulls us into forgetting the fire that forged us. We mistake safety for security, ease for excellence. And in doing so, we lose the capacity to push beyond our limits. So ask yourself, in a life curated for your pleasure, what is there left to conquer? If every obstacle dissolves at your command, where do you find the edge that sharpens your will? As we begin this journey, know that the lure of comfort is seductive, and when we surrender to it, we may awaken one day to discover our greatest strength has slipped through our fingers. Have you ever wondered why empires that once strode the world with iron wills end in marble decadence? Across millennia, history writes the same tragic refrain. Hardship forges greatness, and greatness breeds comfort, and comfort breeds decay. Consider the Spartans, whose childhoods were trials by fire. Boys dragged through ice-cold rivers, their tears dried by whipping winds. Their strength emerged from relentless hardship. Every drop of sweat, every aching muscle was a testament to endurance. They built a society welded together by struggle, a single unbreakable phalanx facing each dawn with sharpened spears. Contrast that with the late Roman Republic, when marble baths replaced battlefield mud and silk tunics replaced leather armor. Once, Rome's legions marched through snow and desert. Once, citizen soldiers rose before dawn to drill and endure. But as wealth streamed in, the citizen soldier became a pampered patrician. Their togas grew finer, their feasts grew grander, and their appetites, both physical and moral, grew ever more insatiable. Ambition gave way to idleness. Civic duty wilted beneath layers of privilege. Journey east to the Han Dynasty. In its early years, peasants with calloused hands tilled rice paddies by candlelight. Scholars huddled in cold rooms, memorizing Confucian texts by flickering oil lamps. Communities bonded over shared hardship, and the dynasty's boundaries expanded under relentless ambition. Yet, in later centuries, silk-clad courtiers drifted through palaces draped in brocade. Tax coffers overflowed even as the people starved. Bureaucracy ballooned even as borders shrank. The gilded interiors of imperial chambers became gilded cages, beautiful, yet empty of purpose. Move forward again to the court of Versailles. Corridors lined with gold leaf, gardens manicured to impossibility, fountains that danced to the whims of composers. Louis XIV proclaimed himself the Sun King, but behind the splendor lurked a rot, a populace paying impossible taxes, a treasury bleeding dry on vanity projects, an aristocracy so accustomed to indulgence they could not fathom sacrifice. The palace stood as monument to human ambition, but also to human hubris. Through each case, scholars remind us, the same cycle repeats because it is woven into our collective DNA. Hardship demands unity. It requires ingenuity. It insists that every hand, rich or poor, lift the burden. From that crucible emerges technology, art, law, the building blocks of civilization. Then prosperity arrives, the crucible cools, and ease seeps in. Gradually, virtue is privatized, entitlement becomes birthright, and the social contract frays beneath gilded facades. What drives this metamorphosis? Sociologists point to shifting values. Necessity once honored, now scorned. Struggle once revered, now reviled. Economists chart the decline in risk tolerance. Societies that remember famine innovate. Societies that forget famine stagnate. Cultural theorists observe a new aristocracy of leisure, an entire class defined not by its contributions, but by its consumption. By the end of this chapter, the pattern is unmistakable. Hardship, unity, innovation, prosperity, comfort, complacency, decline. Each link in the chain is a warning. The very comforts we covet sow the seeds of our undoing. And yet, there is hope. Recognizing the cycle is the first step to interrupting it. When we see the warning signs, when marble baths replace mud-rammed trenches, when silk tunics replace leather armor, when the halls of power become velvet-lined sanctuaries, we can choose to resist. We can recommit to shared struggle, to disciplines that sharpen character, to collective purpose that outlasts individual pleasure. Because if history teaches us anything, it is that civilizations do not collapse overnight. They crumble under the slow buffet of complacency. And if we wish to stand apart from the ruins, we must remember, strength is not inherited, it is earned again and again through the fires of challenge. Why do we reach for the remote instead of the book? Why does scrolling endlessly through our phones feel easier than facing the silence of our own thoughts? The answer isn't weakness, it's wiring. Our brains are not built for moderation. They're built for survival. And in a world where scarcity was once the norm, ease was a signal of safety. The reward circuits of the brain, those tiny clusters of neurons in the limbic system, light up when we encounter sugar, novelty, rest, and pleasure. In the wild, those rewards were rare. In the modern world, they're endless. Every like on social media, every instant reply, every click-to-buy dopamine hit triggers the same ancient systems designed to help us find food, flee danger, or connect socially. But now, those systems are hijacked. Instead of motivation, we get dependency. Instead of satisfaction, we feel a need for more. Neuropsychologists call this the dopamine loop, a cycle of stimulation that grows shallower with each hit. The more frequently we reward ourselves without effort, the more our brains normalize ease as the baseline and react with stress when that ease is interrupted. In a behavioral study, 2 groups were tested for patience. One was made to wait, to earn their reward through tasks and time. The other received theirs instantly. When both were later asked to perform a delayed gratification task, the instant group faltered. Their frustration tolerance had dropped. Their attention span shortened. Now imagine that effect multiplied across a society. What happens when a generation grows up swiping rather than striving? What happens when challenge becomes a glitch in the system rather than a normal part of growth? A former athlete tells his story. In his youth, hunger drove him. Hunger for the win, hunger for respect. He trained at dawn, studied film at night. Then came fame, sponsorships, endless comfort. He didn't even notice the shift. He just stopped pushing. The fire dimmed quietly, until one day it was gone. A writer shares her experience. Once she wrote daily, disciplined and focused. But comfort creeped in. Food delivery, streaming shows, algorithmic rewards. She still had the time, the tools, but not the will. Her mind fragmented, her words blurred. The blank page no longer invited creativity. It provoked anxiety. What these stories reveal is this. Chronic comfort rewires not just behavior, but identity. We stop seeing ourselves as resilient, capable beings. Instead, we become consumers of ease. And slowly, insidiously, we lose the muscle of discipline. It isn't just about willpower. It's about neural pathways. The more we choose ease, the more our brain prunes away the roads less traveled. The ones that demand patience, discomfort, risk. Like in used trails through a forest, they fade from lack of use. And so, the craving becomes biological. We crave comfort not because we're lazy, but because our brains have mistaken it for survival. But in doing so, they've confused survival with stagnation. This is the hidden trap. Ease isn't just something we desire. It's something we become addicted to. And like all addictions, the cost is paid in silence, until the bill arrives all at once, in the form of lost resilience, eroded ambition, and a life half-lived. By the end of this journey inward, one truth emerges. The human mind was built to struggle, and in avoiding struggle, we betray the very engine that propels our growth. Comfort may feel like home, but it's a home with no doors, no exits, no expansion, only repetition. The antidote begins not with more effort, but with awareness. Awareness that ease is not neutral. It's a force that shapes us. And without resistance, it reshapes us into something smaller than we were meant to be. In every era, power shifts not only through steel and speech, but through whispers sold as comfort. Today, the marketplace of ease hums louder than ever, and its true architects hide behind screens and polished slogans. Marketing has always traded on desire, once for gold, now for frictionless living. A 1950s washing machine promised more time for family. Today's smart home ads promise more time for living. The promise is the same. Labor is bad, leisure is good. But beneath each tagline lies an unspoken bargain. Surrender your struggle, and we'll curate your choices. What began as simple persuasion has evolved into systemic conditioning. Influencers casually extol the virtues of a 5-minute morning routine that magically transforms your life. Productivity gurus package shortcuts to success. Wellness apps gamify breath work and gratitude, laundering discipline into a set of bright icons. Every click, every tap, nudges us away from effort and toward easy dopamine. Media analysts trace the trajectory. First came the life hacks, ingenious techniques for saving seconds here and there. But seconds accumulate into habit, and habits accumulate into identity. Then came productivity porn, endless walkthroughs of color-coded planners and perfectly formatted spreadsheets. Finally, the promise of full outsourcing. Why master any skill when you can subscribe to a service? Large corporations and governments lean into this narrative. A tech CEO lauds seamless integration, while a public health campaign urges stress-free living. The message is uniform. Hardship is obsolete. Want stronger muscles? There's a pill. Want mental clarity? Download the patch. Want social bonds? Join the premium community. In every promise, toil is recast as inefficiency and convenience as the highest virtue. But what if efficiency becomes a trap? When every hurdle is removed, every choice prepackaged, we lose the opportunity to test our capacity. We misuse the term empowered, thinking that consumption of convenience equates to self-determination. Yet real empowerment requires agency, choosing the hard path because it leads somewhere worth going. Consider the wellness industry's ironies. Apps that remind you to meditate, but send you push notifications so frequent you never truly unplug. Retreats that charge thousands of dollars to teach digital detox, yet inscribe their logos on every tote bag and Instagram filter. We pay to escape our devices, but bring them everywhere for the perfect shot. The very tools meant to liberate us become new chains. At its most insidious, this propaganda reframes adversity as a moral failing. Struggle is no longer an expected rite of passage, but a personal deficiency. Proof that you haven't invested in the right program, haven't hired the right coach, haven't bought the right gadget. Self-help becomes self-blame, and the irony is stark. In seeking to avoid discomfort, we build a culture that shames anyone who dares to endure it. Underpinning it all is algorithmic reinforcement. Social platforms learn what soothes us and flood our feeds accordingly. Recipes for the laziest meals, hacks that shrink every task to a headline, quizzes that promise insight without inquiry. We are not merely consumers of products, but consumers of narratives. that life should be easy, and if it isn't, there is something wrong with us. Yet history shows that comfort sold as salvation often yields stagnation. Societies that outsource struggle to technology and bureaucracy risk hollowing out their collective spirit. When boredom becomes unbearable because there is no challenge, we mistake distraction for purpose. When inconvenience is vilified, we deny ourselves the very friction that forges creativity. Breaking the spell of by ease, avoid effort, demands more than rejecting a gadget or unsubscribing from an app. It requires recognizing that our institutions, educational, corporate, governmental, are invested in keeping us passive. Convenience is the currency by which we pay for comfort, but it costs us our autonomy. True agency arises when we claim discomfort as a tool rather than a burden. When we accept that the path to mastery is neither curated nor automated, but walked step by deliberate step. When we realize that struggle is not a relic of the past, but the lifeblood of innovation. Because no amount of glossy promotion can replace the grit born of challenge. And no promise of seamless living can substitute for the triumph felt when we surmount obstacles with our own two hands. In the end, the softest societies are the first to crack, and the cure begins when we see through the propaganda and choose, consciously, to reclaim our hard-won resilience. They can order a latte with a tap, but balk at balancing a checkbook. They can summon car service in seconds, but tremble at the thought of doing laundry. Across cities and suburbs alike, a pattern emerges, a generation fluent in convenience, yet floundering in adversity. Take Maya, a recent college graduate with honors and a six-figure student debt. She grew up in the era of free Wi-Fi and digital textbooks, taught that every answer lay online. Yet when rent rose unexpectedly and her online budgeting app glitched, she found herself paralyzed, unable to reconcile her bank statements, too anxious to call for help. Fear of judgment kept her silent, and minor financial missteps ballooned into crises of confidence. Then there's Deshaun, who declined a weekend overtime shift because the extra money wasn't worth the stress. He'd internalized the mantra that work is self-care, that boundaries protect mental health. But when budgeting miscalculations left his account overdrawn, he discovered that boundaries without accountability can become walls of isolation. Communities once rallied together in storm's wake. Now, a power outage sparks panic memes before any helping hand appears. A small-town neighborhood association collapsed after a brief internet blackout. Meetings dissolved when the group chat went dark, and volunteers stopped showing up at food drives when the online sign-up form malfunctioned. Their grandparents remember ration coupons, blackout drills, early morning milking chores. They learned to endure rain-soaked fields, broken-down tractors, and the sting of cold water on a winter dawn. Their strengths were forged in scarcity. Their resilience was measured in sweat and shared sacrifice. Today's youth, reared on padded cushions and cushioned expectations, often feel overwhelmed by the slightest discomfort. These aren't isolated anecdotes, but threads woven into a broader tapestry. Animated data reveals a startling correlation. As levels of household comfort rise, so too do rates of anxiety, depression, and learned helplessness. College students report higher stress for minor setbacks than soldiers do returning from deployment. Employees file for medical leave after routine team meetings for emotional exhaustion. Sociologists caution about painting an entire generation with one brush. Terms like fragile millennial or iGen risk simplifying complex social dynamics. Yet they admit a truth. In pursuit of safety, physical, emotional, digital, we have eroded the very struggles that teach agency. When every error is forgiven with a click, when every challenge is smoothed over by algorithms, we lose the urgent incentive to adapt and learn. Consider the young entrepreneur who launches a startup with venture capital backing and folds at the first cash flow hiccup, or the remote worker whose productivity plummets when the home office coffee machine breaks. These stories underscore that comfort without contingency breeds dependency. When failure carries no real consequence, the courage to persevere withers. And yet empathy must underlie our critique. These young adults did not ask for a world of padded walls and padded egos. They were reared by institutions that equated self-esteem with self-validation, that equated protective policies with empowerment. They've inherited a landscape where every discomfort is pathologized, a culture that prescribes therapy for minor stressors but offers few opportunities to build grit. Witness the college campus that bans cold-weather cross-country hikes for fear of emotional distress, or the corporate office that provides nap pods but no performance feedback. In the quest to shelter individuals from hardship, we have stripped away the essential tools for coping with it. We have made endurance seem archaic, struggles seem avoidable, and accountability seem punitive. By the close of this chapter, one reality is undeniable. A fragile generation is not merely a social media trope, but a collective signal that our comforts have overstepped their bounds. As viewers, we feel both compassion for individuals trapped by ease and alarm for societies ill-equipped to face real crises. The question looms: if we cannot navigate small storms, how will we weather the hurricanes that lie ahead? The answer will define us, not as consumers of convenience, but as stewards of resilience. When cushions replace challenges, the fallout rarely shouts, it seeps. First, the economy falters. Companies built on innovation thrive on adversity. When supply chains falter, they improvise. When markets swoon, they pivot. In contrast, organizations accustomed to frictionless growth hemorrhage talent at the first sign of turbulence. A black swan event, a sudden citywide blackout, reveals the truth. Teams accustomed to Zoom calls scramble for flashlights. Servers crash because no one practiced manual overrides. Warehouses lie empty when workers panic rather than problem solve. Economic stagnation follows, not because resources vanish, but because the will to mobilize them disappears. Startups that once raised millions fail to raise an eyebrow when projections slip. Mid-sized firms abandon ambitious R&D for safe, incremental tweaks. Whole industries retreat behind subsidies rather than wrestle with disruption. Comfort breeds risk aversion, and risk aversion starves growth. Next, politics sags under apathy. Voting booths lie deserted while TikTok challenges go viral. When democracy demands participation, debate, compromise, sacrifice, and indulgent populist shrugs. Voter turnout plummets. Political discourse shrinks to viral sound bites. Demagogues promise novelty without toil, peddling easy fixes for complex problems. Policy experts warn, a disengaged electorate yields governance without accountability, and convenience-seeking citizens trade civic duty for curated outrage. Then comes the human toll and crisis. Consider public health systems engineered for predictability. In calm years, budgets expand, but drills and preparedness rot away. When a pandemic strikes, hospitals scramble for ventilators. Medical staff, and use to improvise protocols, freeze under pressure. Contact tracing apps fail when users lack basic troubleshooting skills. Infrastructure, built for ideal conditions, buckles under stress. Bridges corrode, grids overload. Water systems collapse at the first unusual demand. In education, too, complacency takes root. Classrooms optimized for comfort produce students who falter when remote learning glitches or standardized tests challenge them beyond rote memory. Across the globe, a montage of recent crises flashes by. Flooded streets where first responders hesitate. Wildfires where volunteers lack equipment. Economic crashes met with muted protests. And always, the same refrain, we didn't see this coming. Yet these were not unforeseeable disasters, but probabilities that eroded preparedness and eroded resolve. Complacency doesn't announce itself. It disguises decay behind smooth metrics and glossy reports. A city's unemployment rate may hover low, but under the surface, undertrained workforces and brittle supply chains lie in wait. A nation's GDP can grow, while civic engagement wanes and social capital dissolves. Policy analysts emphasize that cushioned systems buckle like hardened rubber bands. They resist stretching until, suddenly, they snap. Without calibrated stressors, competitive markets, active citizen participation, routine emergency exercises, institutions lose their elasticity. They can endure calm, but they cannot withstand chaos. By the end of this section, the stakes are clarified. Comfort is not harmless. It is a toxin that accumulates drop by drop until the container bursts. A society that avoids friction artifice finds itself untested when reality demands grit. Economic engines stall, democracies hollow out, crises overwhelm unpracticed hands. And so we confront a paradox. To build resilience, we must invite discomfort. To safeguard prosperity, we must embrace challenge. Because only through pressure do systems and people transform adversity into strength. Without that crucible, our collective future may hinge not on what we can achieve, but on what we forgot to endure. Here, we reclaim struggle as our greatest ally, transforming hardship from foe into forge. We begin with voluntary discomfort, deliberate acts that push our boundaries. A winter swimmer describes her first plunge into ice-cold water. The gasp, the shock, the rapid pulse of life returning. She speaks of how embracing that moment shattered her fear of minor pains, a recalibration of what hard truly means. A digital detox participant recalls the first day without notifications. The restlessness, the boredom, the ache, not of loneliness, but of untapped attention-seeking purpose. Through these rituals, they discover capacity they never knew they had. Across the globe, minimalist challenge groups strip their lives to essentials. One member tells of paring possessions down to 50 items, each justified, each earned. In that sparsity, she found clarity, fewer distractions, more intention. The discomfort of absence taught her to value presence, of mind, of work, of community. Philosophers invoke stoic disciplines, voluntary poverty, discomfort as daily practice, reflective journaling after each test of will. Psychologists introduce anti-fragility, a concept coined by Nassim Taleb, systems that grow stronger under stress. They explain how muscles not only recover from exertion, but adapt to endure greater loads, how immune systems learn from exposure, how minds, too, can fortify through calibrated adversity. We hear from a community garden collective that rebuilt an urban lot by hand. No machinery, just sweat and teamwork. Each shovelful of earth was an exercise in patience, humility, and collective purpose. As elder gardeners passed on centuries-old techniques, seed saving, composting, the younger volunteers absorbed more than skill. They absorbed resilience. Triathletes share how training for endurance races reshaped their self-image. They speak of runs at dawn when every fiber of their being screamed to stop. Yet each step beyond that pain threshold expanded their sense of possibility, not just in sport, but in life's trials. Artisan workshops preserve crafts once lost to automation. A blacksmith recalls hammering red-hot metal until his arms burned, shaping tools that last centuries. He contrasts that lasting value with the disposable goods of convenience. His workshop is loud, hot, demanding, but it's where purpose and pride converge. Through each testimony, one pattern emerges. Small, consistent struggles rebuild confidence. They hone focus, spark creativity, and reforge communal bonds. When we endure together, lifting stones, breaking digital habits, mastering ancient crafts, we rediscover the roots of our agency. This is no call to masochism. It's a blueprint for resilient living. Begin by identifying one friction point, a habit you rely on for ease, a service you outsource without necessity. Then, remove it. Cold showers instead of hot, handwritten letters instead of instant messages, hands in soil instead of swipes on screens. Observe how your mind and body react. Notice the resistance. That tension is where growth begins. Gradually scale the challenge. Volunteer for service projects that require sweat. Join groups that enforce device-free gatherings. Adopt schedules that demand discipline rather than convenience. With each calibrated hardship, track not only what you accomplish, but who you become. a person with a keener edge, a quieter mind, a stronger will. Reclaiming struggle is not an endpoint, but a journey. We build anti-fragile lives by seeking stressors that expand our capacity, not to break us, but to break through. In this crucible, comfort loses its power to numb, and we wake to a world where challenge is not a burden, but our greatest teacher. Embrace discomfort as your ally. Forge resilience by stepping into the intentional struggle. In doing so, you transform not just yourself, but the world you inhabit, one deliberate hardship at a time. The moment of transformation beckons. All our warnings, all our experiments, all our recoveries converge here at the crossroads of choice. Comfort has been our cradle, but now it must become our challenge. The question is simple yet profound. Will you let ease cage your potential, or will you rise to forge your own resilience? Imagine a programmer who traded endless weekends in soft chairs for the scent of sawdust in a carpentry shop. At first, her hands trembled over chisels and hammers, and used to weight and resistance. But with every measured cut, she reclaimed a sense of agency stripped by screens and algorithms. Each wooden joint became a testament. She was more than a consumer. She was a creator. Picture a teacher who once filled classrooms with sanitized lessons. Now she teaches fire building and knot tying alongside algebra. Students' eyes light up when they coax sparks from flint, discovering that knowledge is not just something to ingest, but something forged through effort. They learn not only facts, but courage, the understanding that competence grows where challenge dwells. Envision a city that traded its annual Comfort Expo for a year of hardship festival. Citizens queued for cold plunge pools, volunteer masonry workshops, and communal hiking expeditions. Skeptics scoffed at first, but by mid-season, lines to unplugged retreats snaked around the park. People shared stories of rediscovered grit, of bonds formed through shared struggle, of fears overcome by collective grit. These are not isolated triumphs. They are beacons, proof that when we embrace discomfort intentionally, we incubate strength. This strength is not born of suffering alone. It is born of deliberate confrontation with our limits. It is the spark that ignites innovation and the backbone that sustains purpose. Now look inward. What challenge have you evaded because it felt unnecessary? What skill have you let atrophy because an easier path existed? The warrior within does not demand endless hardship, but it does insist on trials worthy of our potential. It whispers, "Seek the edge where growth lives." This is the culminating call. Architect your own crucible. Start small. Introduce a daily routine that tests your resolve. It could be a cold shower at dawn, a page of handwritten reflection at dusk, a weekend spent learning a craft with your bare hands. Notice the ache, the hesitation, the doubt. Welcome them, for they are the heralds of transformation. Strength does not lie in never feeling pain, but in rising each time we do. It lies not in grand gestures, but in the steady accumulation of micro-conquests. It lies in choosing the hard path, not because it is heroic, but because it is real. Real paths carve real destinies. The final truth emerges. Good times will ebb, and comforts will shift beneath our feet. But the resilience we build through conscious struggle endures. It becomes the armor we wear into every unknown, the compass that guides us when ease loses its appeal. As the film closes, let this resonate. Good times may come and go, but strength endures when we dare to struggle. In that struggle, we awaken the warrior within, and in awakening, we reclaim the fullness of our humanity. Have you ever felt unshakably safe, yet strangely empty? In an age when every need is anticipated before it even arises, comfort has become our default setting, and perhaps our greatest undoing. We find ourselves nestled into plush routines, our ambitions softened by the very conveniences we once celebrated. When every obstacle is smoothed over, our capacity to overcome begins to atrophy. Generations past knew hardship as an uninvited guest. The biting cold of winter without heat, the gnawing hunger of a missed harvest, the constant threat that tomorrow might strip away today's fragile gains. From those crucibles of necessity arose iron wills and collective resolve. We revered struggle as the forge of character, believing that only in the clash of challenge could purpose be born. Yet now, struggle has become an outlier, a glitch in the system rather than a rite of passage. We outsource effort to machines and apps, trading muscle for buttons, perseverance for subscriptions. We scroll through infinite feeds, chasing novelty that flares and fades, leaving us hungry for more stimulation, yet starved of meaning. We binge entire seasons in single nights, then stare at blank walls, wondering where the story went and where our own drive disappeared. This is the paradox of abundance. The more we amass, the less we appreciate. The fridge full of food becomes a blur of choices. The treadmill, ever ready, sits cold. The limitless library of entertainment grows dust on our hard drives, while our minds grow soft. Each small convenience lulls us into believing that ease equates to progress, that we are advancing simply because our lives are more comfortable. But comfort, when unchecked, breeds complacency. Consider the adage, good times create weak men. It is not a declaration that suffering is inherently virtuous, but a warning that without pressure to test our limits, we lose the edge that defines us. Just as metal must be tempered by heat, character must be tempered by challenge. In the absence of friction, our ambitions slip from our grasp like water through uncalloused hands. When we mistake safety for security, we mistake the absence of hardship for the presence of strength. We confuse the hum of air conditioning with the pulse of our own potential. We lull ourselves into believing that a life without struggle is a life fulfilled, only to discover, too late, that fulfillment demands more than ease. It demands engagement, risk, and the willingness to stand firm when every instinct urges us to retreat. So pause for a moment and ask, in a world curated for your comfort, what remains to be conquered? If every barrier dissolves at your command, where do you find the crucible that forges your will? When every desire is met before it forms, how do you learn the alchemy of resilience? This is our opening challenge, to recognize that comfort is not a neutral force, but a sculptor of our destiny. It shapes us with a subtle hand, softening our resolve even as it cushions our bodies. If we surrender to its seduction, we risk awakening one day to discover that the very strength we took for granted has slipped away. And so we begin, not with the promise of sanctuary, but with the invitation to awaken, to question the ease that surrounds us, to feel the void it leaves behind, and to remember that true strength lies not in the absence of struggle, but in the courage to meet it head-on. From the windswept agoras of ancient Greece to the gilded corridors of Versailles, history reveals a pattern as relentless as time itself. Hardship begets unity and innovation. Unity begets prosperity, and prosperity, and its comforts, breeds complacency that ushers in decline. Imagine Sparta at its height. Young citizens endured frigid mornings and rations, so meager hunger became their constant companion. That shared struggle welded them into an unbreakable phalanx, each man trusting the next with his life. Their society prized duty over desire, discipline over indulgence, and from that rigor emerged legends of valor that endured for millennia. Contrast this with Rome's transition from republic to empire. In its early days, Roman citizens labored in fields and drilled in legions. They bore the weight of shield and spear, the sting of cold steel, believing that every drop of sweat served the greater good. But as conquering armies returned laden with wealth, marble baths replaced battlefield scrapes, and silk tunics replaced leather armor. Civic duty softened into aristocratic leisure. Senate debates gave way to banquet gossip. Civic virtue was traded for private excess. Now travel east to China's Han Dynasty. Scholars once burned midnight oil by candlelight to master Confucian texts. Peasants formed water buffalo, drawn plows in sun-scorched fields, and artisans learned to melt bronze under the guidance of trial and error. That crucible of necessity yielded inventions: papermaking, the compass, steel forging, that shaped the world. Yet in the dynasty's twilight, silk-clad courtiers danced among lacquered halls. The imperial granaries overflowed even as famine struck the countryside, and the ornate trappings of power became gilded cages for the complacent elite. Finally, picture Versailles under the Sun King. Louis XIV transformed a humble hunting lodge into a palace of gold and mirrors. Nobles flocked to etiquette lessons and masked balls, their fortunes measured not by deeds, but by attendance and opulence. While the court luxuriated, the state's coffers strained under endless pageantry, and France's underclasses brooded in the shadows of fountains they could never drink from. Across continents and centuries, the template remains the same. Shared hardship sparks unity. Unity fuels creativity. Creativity breeds prosperity. Prosperity invites comfort. Comfort corrodes resolve. Every thread in this tapestry, Sparta's rigorous training, Rome's battlefield camaraderie, Han China's inventiveness, Versailles' hedonism, reveals that good times plant the seeds of their own undoing. By recognizing this cycle, hardship, strength, prosperity, complacency, decline, we reclaim the power to interrupt it. We learn that civilizations rise not by avoiding discomfort, but by embracing it as the furnace that tempers collective character. If our age is to avoid history's graveyard of fallen empires, we must remember that strength is neither inherited nor sustained by luxury, but forged anew each day through challenges met and struggles overcome. Have you ever felt a thrill the moment your phone lights up, an unspoken promise of connection, only to discover a hollow ache once the novelty fades? That spark is dopamine, ancient fuel coursing through our modern veins, rewarding ease in a loop our ancestors never imagined. Our brains are wired for survival. Seek sweetness, avoid danger, conserve energy. In a world of scarcity, those impulses were life-saving. Today, they're exploited by every tap, swipe, and click. Social media notifications trigger tiny surges of pleasure. Streaming platforms autoplay episode after episode. Food arrives at our doors before hunger fully registers. Each instant hit wires the message deep. The path of least resistance is the path to reward. Neuropsychologists call it the dopamine loop, a cycle that tightens its grip with every shortcut we choose. In a classic experiment, two groups chase tokens for small prizes. One group waits, earning rewards through effort. The other gets theirs instantly. Later, both face a delayed gratification task. Save tokens for a larger payout. The immediate reward group falters nearly every time. Their patience, like an used muscle, has atrophied. What happens when that effect ripples through an entire generation? When adolescence unfolds amid push-button pleasures, the very concept of waiting becomes foreign. We grow accustomed to frictionless living, so much so that any resistance feels like failure. Consider the ex-athlete who once ran dawn miles on empty roads. Prize money arrived, sponsorships flooded in, and comfort seeped into his regimen. Gourmet meals, private jets, personal chefs. Subtly, the zeal faded. Morning alarms sounded like alarms in a distant world. He traded early sprints for late breakfasts. Within months, his record-breaking times plateaued, then slipped. The rush of victory couldn't outpace the lull of ease. Or the writer who once met her word count over candlelight, chasing inspiration through disciplined toil. Now, she writes between streaming marathons and snack deliveries. Distraction has become routine. The blinking cursor mocks her focus. She opens a social app, then another, caught in the web of instant gratification. Creativity demands struggle, but her brain no longer sees delay as worthwhile. Through stylized animations, we see neural pathways shift. Circuits that once fired strongest during effort now glow brightest at the first sign of comfort. Resilience dims, replaced by a craving for the effortless. Frustration mounts at the slightest inconvenience. Slow loading times, forgotten passwords, a subscription lapse. Each hiccup feels catastrophic. This isn't mere habit, it's a neurological trap. Ease becomes a craving that reshapes identity. We cease to see ourselves as builders of character or conquerors of challenge. Instead, we become consumers of convenience, defined by how quickly our desires can be met. And yet awareness offers the first fissure in the trap. Recognizing that every shortcut rewires our brains empowers us to choose the hard path deliberately. Because true fulfillment doesn't arrive on demand. It emerges from delayed gratification, from the pride in earned progress, from the grit honed by resistance. As we close this chapter, remember, the mind is a muscle. Left untested, it weakens. When challenged, it grows stronger. Seek not the swiftest reward, but the most meaningful journey. Because in resisting the dopamine loop, we reclaim not only our focus, but the fierce joy of becoming more than our impulses. In the marketplace of modern life, comfort has become the most valuable commodity, and its merchants wield immense power. From slick tech giants to government agencies, an unspoken pact has formed. We surrender our struggle, and they deliver effortless living. Remember the black and white ads of the 1950s, hawking washing machines with happy housewives proclaiming more time for you. Those nostalgic images have warped into today's influencer reels, where smiling hosts demonstrate one-minute hacks that eliminate any vestige of effort. A vintage slogan, "Work smarter, not harder," has mutated into "Why work at all?" Marketing executives openly tout frictionless user experiences. CEOs promise that every transaction, every chore, every decision can be automated. Seamless integration from cradle to grave. A public service announcement urges us to optimize your life for ease, as if hardship were a bug to patch out. Each message carries an undercurrent. Struggle is obsolete, discipline is passé, and if you feel unfulfilled, you simply haven't downloaded the right app. Media analysts break down the machinery. Lifehack websites monetize micro tips that save seconds, breeding the illusion of productivity without sacrifice. Productivity porn channels parade color-coded planners and achievement logs, turning discipline into spectacle but never demanding genuine discomfort. Wellness brands sell fragrant candles, guided meditations, and padded retreats, only to plaster their logos across every social feed, contradicting the very promise of escape. This propaganda reframes adversity as personal failure. Algorithms detect our slightest pang of frustration, a slow loading page, a missed workout, and bombard us with quick fixes. Get your energy back in 10 minutes. Boost your mood with a single pill. We are taught to pathologize any emotional or mental pain, while tireless marketing glosses over the fact that pain often signals growth. Policymakers have joined the chorus. A health initiative celebrates stress-free workplaces, mandating ergonomic chairs in nap rooms, but sidestepping training in resilience or crisis management. Educational reforms remove high-stakes assessments in favor of participation trophies, all in the name of preserving self-esteem. In every corner, institutions champion comfort as an end in itself. Yet these soft soap strategies carry a hidden cost. By outsourcing every challenge to external solutions, we relinquish the internal muscle of discipline. We cease to see ourselves as architects of our own destiny, and instead become passive recipients of curated experiences. When every adversity can be smoothed over, we lose the capacity to navigate real hardship. Consider the rise of subscription culture. Meal kits, curated wardrobes, pre-signed petitions, even rent-a-friend apps. Each service promises to eliminate effort, but in doing so, they commodify human connection and craftsmanship. We forget how to cook from scratch, how to mend a tear, how to negotiate disagreement, skills honed only through trial and error. As the tension builds, the true motive reveals itself. These systems thrive on dependence. The more we crave ease, the deeper we slide into passivity, and the more we consume. Comfort becomes both product and prison, shaping our identities as consumers rather than creators. Breaking free demands a critical eye. We must ask, who benefits when hardship is banished? What happens when the tools designed to liberate us instead remodel us into compliant dependence? Only by recognizing that systemic forces profit from our passivity can we begin to reclaim our agency. In the end, selling softness is not benign marketing, it is propaganda. And the antidote lies in seeing through the veneer of convenience, in resisting the seductive promise that ease equals empowerment. Because true empowerment requires struggle, and any system that eradicates struggle seeks not to uplift us, but to contain us. They can order a gourmet meal with a tap, yet freeze at a simple budget spreadsheet. They can summon a ride in seconds, but tremble at the thought of doing laundry. Across the suburbs and city centers, a troubling pattern emerges, a generation fluent in convenience, yet floundering in adversity. Meet Maya, a recent college graduate with honors and 6 figures in student debt. She learned every answer lay online, until rent spiked and her budgeting app glitched. Panic set in. She stared at her bank statements, too anxious to call her landlord. A minor financial hiccup became a spiral of dread, not because the numbers were insurmountable, but because she'd never practiced wrestling with uncertainty. Then there's Deshaun, who refused a weekend overtime shift. It's not worth the stress, he said. Boundaries, he'd been told, safeguard mental health. Yet when his account hit zero, those boundaries became brittle walls he couldn't climb. A little extra cash might have saved him, but he'd been trained to treat discomfort as criminal rather than character building. Communities fracture, too. A brief internet outage sent neighbors scurrying for memes, not shovels. A local food drive collapsed when the online sign-up form crashed and volunteers didn't know how to organize by phone. In an emergency, they waited for push notifications instead of banding together. Contrast these stories with voices from past. Grandparents recall ration coupons, blackout drills, dawn milking chores before school. They knew adversity as constant companion and learned grit in rain-soaked fields. They bonded over shared toil. They celebrated each harvest like a victory. Their resilience was forged in necessity. Now, data tell the rest of the tale. Animated graphs chart a stark correlation. As household comforts climb, so do rates of anxiety, depression, and learned helplessness. College students report more stress from a missed deadline than soldiers face returning from deployment. Entry-level employees file medical leave after routine meetings, citing emotional exhaustion. Sociologists warn against caricatures. The fragile millennial or iGen tropes oversimplify multigenerational factors. Yet they admit a truth. In the pursuit of safety, physical, emotional, digital, we have eroded the very struggles that teach agency. When every error is forgiven with a click, every challenge airtight by policy, the incentive to adapt and learn disappears. Consider the young entrepreneur backed by venture capital who folds at the first revenue shortfall, or the remote worker whose productivity plummets when the home office coffee machine breaks. These are not failures of ability, but of preparedness. Comfort without contingency begets dependency. Still, empathy must temper our alarm. These young adults inherited systems that equate self-esteem with unbroken positivity, that prescribe therapy for minor stressors but offer few opportunities to build toughness. Campuses ban cross-country hikes for fear of emotional distress. Offices install nap pods but avoid frank performance feedback. In sheltering every soul from discomfort, we've stripped away essential tools for confronting it. By chapter's close, one reality emerges. A fragile generation is not mere media fodder, but a warning beacon. Our comforts have overstepped their bounds, eroding our collective capacity to face storms, both minor and massive. If we cannot navigate small crises, how will we withstand the hurricanes on the horizon? The answer lies not in blame, but in rebuilding agency. Teaching financial literacy over finance apps, reviving community drills over reliance on alerts, embracing measured discomfort as a crucible for growth. Only then can we transform fragility into fortitude and turn a generation of passive consumers into architects of resilience. When comfort becomes the norm, decline arrives in silence, until it strikes with a severity we no longer recognize. First, economies once powered by innovation stall under the weight of risk aversion. Companies that thrived on rapid iteration suddenly freeze when disruptions hit. A sudden blackout in a major metropolis reveals the weak underbelly. Employees, unaccustomed to manual processes, scramble for instructions. Key personnel call in sick rather than troubleshoot. Supply chains grind to a halt because no one practiced contingency plans. Talent flees uncertainty, leaving hollow shells of businesses that once led industries. Investment dries up, not for lack of capital, but for lack of confidence that anyone can adapt. Next comes the yawning chasm of political apathy. When voting is recast as a chore, turnout collapses. Civic engagement dwindles to retweets and reaction gifs. Meanwhile, demagogues fill the void, offering simplistic solutions and easy targets. Experts warn that democracies thrive on debate and sacrifice. Voting, protest, compromise. But in a culture that prizes comfort over conviction, sacrifice wears a negative connotation. Patched-over policies replace structural reform, and disillusioned citizens retreat behind curated news feeds that confirm their beliefs rather than challenge them. Systems meant to protect us buckle under stress. In public health, years of padding budgets with just-in-case stockpiles give way to logistical nightmares in real crises. Hospitals optimized for routine care lack the flexibility for surging demand. Staff, accustomed to predictable schedules, burn out during emergency rotations. Infrastructure shows similar brittleness. Water networks corroded by deferred maintenance fail under heat waves. Bridges rated safe collapse under unexpected loads. Power grids shudder when peak demand spikes by only a few percentage points. Schools, too, flounder. Classrooms designed for comfort struggle to pivot to remote learning when systems falter, leaving students adrift. A rapid montage of recent global crises underscores the pattern. A pandemic met with vaccine shortages despite years of promised preparedness. Hurricanes that topple untested levees. Cyber attacks that cripple unsecured systems overnight. Each event is not a freak anomaly, but a predictable test we failed by neglecting small, routine stressors. Policy analysts describe this complacency as a slow-moving toxin. Without calibrated challenges, regular drills, competitive markets, community-led problem-solving, institutions lose the muscle memory of adaptability. They can coast in calm, but snap in chaos. The human cost is equally stark. Workers stripped of resilience through cushioned environments experience acute anxiety at minor setbacks. A late email triggers panic. A short-term deadline feels insurmountable. Mental health services, overwhelmed by chronic low-grade stress, falter when acute trauma arrives. Communities accustomed to digital lifelines hesitate to offer in-person support, leaving vulnerable populations stranded. Complacency's final irony. In seeking to avoid hardship, we create a brittle world. Prosperity's soft glow hides structural cracks that grow wider beneath the surface. And when the next crisis looms, whether economic downturn, environmental disaster, or global health emergency, we discover that convenience, once a blessing, has become our Achilles heel. The urgency is clear. Comfort is not a harmless luxury. It is a subtle architect of fragility. To reverse course, we must reintroduce measured stress into our systems, embrace small-scale challenges, foster active citizenship, and prioritize adaptability over ease. Only then can we inoculate our societies against the slow rot of complacency and ensure that when real storms arrive, we stand ready, not rattled. In a world that has outsourced every challenge to convenience, reclaiming our inner strength demands a conscious turn toward calibrated hardship. It begins with voluntary discomfort, purposeful experiments that remind us what it means to confront resistance. A winter swimmer shares how her first plunge into icy water felt like an electric shock to the nervous system. The gasp, the burn, the racing pulse were terrifying and exhilarating. She discovered that embracing that moment defeated the low-grade anxieties that once ruled her days, revealing reserves of calm and focus she never knew existed. Elsewhere, a digital fast practitioner describes shutting off notifications for a full weekend. At first, boredom gnawed at her. No pings, no updates, no distractions. But in that silence, creativity stirred. She drafted pages of writing she'd neglected, listened fully in conversations, and felt an unexpected surge of presence. The discomfort of unplugging became a gateway to deeper engagement, with work, with others, with herself. Minimalism offers another path. One participant chose to pair her wardrobe to 50 items, each garment earned, each sale a reminder of past excess. At first, she mourned the lost choices. Over time, she found freedom in fewer decisions and greater clarity in her priorities. Her mornings no longer began with indecision, but with intent. Philosophers and psychologists weigh in on the science behind these rituals. Nassim Taleb's concept of anti-fragility shows that just as muscles grow stronger under load, systems and people can thrive on stress. A Stoic mentor describes daily practices of voluntary poverty, deliberately foregoing creature comforts, journaling through hardship, and reflecting on mortality to sharpen gratitude. These disciplines do not seek suffering for its own sake, but wield it as a tool, forging resilience that endures beyond the trial itself. Communities, too, are rediscovering the power of collective struggle. In an urban neighborhood, volunteers reclaimed a vacant lot, planting a community garden by hand. No machinery, only teamwork, hose, shovels, and sweat. With each foot of tilled earth, participants learned patience and trust. Elders taught seed-saving techniques that have persisted for centuries, imparting not just skills, but a sense of continuity and shared purpose. Athletes offer another testament. Triathletes speak of dawn runs when every fiber of their being begged them to stop. Yet each step past that internal breaking point expanded their sense of what was possible, not just in sport, but in daily life. They emerged with a quiet confidence that spilled into careers, relationships, and personal goals. Artisans remind us that mastery is born in repetition. A blacksmith recounts hammering red-hot metal until his arms burned, shaping tools that will outlast him. He contrasts that enduring craft with the disposable goods of convenience. His workshop's heat and noise are relentless, yet they produce work of lasting value. A reminder that discomfort applied with purpose yields outcomes that transcend the moment. Each of these narratives converges on one blueprint. Embrace discomfort not as punishment, but as crucible. Start small, perhaps a daily cold shower, a device-free evening, or a single-ingredient diet for a day. Notice the initial resistance, the creeping doubt. That resistance is where growth lives. Gradually scale the challenge. Volunteer in a demanding service project, join a group that enforces regular digital Sabbaths, or learn a manual skill that demands patience and precision. Track not just what you accomplish, but who you become. A person with sharper focus, deeper creativity, and stronger bonds. As these small victories accumulate, they reshape identity, from passive consumer to active maker, from ease seeker to resilience builder. Reclaiming struggle is not an act of self-flagellation. It is a declaration of agency. When we choose calibrated hardship, we break the spell of comfort's deception. We step into the forge of our own becoming and emerge with the strength to face life's inevitable challenges, not as victims, but as architects of our own resilience. A red horizon swells over quiet rooftops. A door creaks open. Bare feet step out onto frost-covered grass. No narration yet, just breath visible in the chill. Then a voice, steady but urgent, speaks. You are not built for endless comfort. You are built to rise. This is our finale, not a conclusion, but an ignition. We weave together the threads of history, psychology, and lived resistance into one imperative, the call to awaken. A montage rolls, a city still groggy from slumber, phones lighting up, doors unlocking. But we cut away from routine. We meet a coder, once drained by doom scrolling, now sanding down reclaimed wood in a sunlit garage. He grins, fingers calloused, saying, "I wanted to make something that could outlast me." His weekends no longer disappear into screens. They're etched into tables, shelves, and a new sense of capability. In another shot, a schoolteacher stands in front of her class. But today, she's not teaching algebra. She's guiding her students through fire-making drills and map reading. "These aren't just survival skills," she explains. "They're confidence skills. I want them to know they can navigate more than just a curriculum." A city mayor, flanked by volunteers, announces a bold civic experiment, the Year of Hardship, a festival not of indulgence, but of challenge. Public spaces host obstacle races, communal cleanups, fasting retreats, DIY workshops. It's a reclamation, not just of struggle, but of shared story. Citizens begin to bond over their efforts, not just their pleasures. As the soaring score swells, we see a woman on a rooftop at dawn, finishing her daily push-ups. A man teaches his daughter how to fish. Teens walk dogs in shelters, unplugged from devices. A disabled veteran lifts weights in silence, each rep echoing the words we now hear. Hardship isn't the enemy. It's the sculptor. Let it chisel you, not into what the world demands, but into what you were always capable of becoming. We return to the same room from section 1, but it's transformed. The plush excess is gone. No more endless gadgets. The couch replaced with a simple mat. A single framed quote on the wall reads, "Sweat more in training, bleed less in battle." The occupant, a once slouched man, now sits upright. He ties his boots, pauses, then smiles, not with comfort but with readiness. The camera lingers on his face, no longer dulled but lit with resolve. Text on screen fades in, line by line. Good times may come and go, but strength endures when we dare to struggle. Fade to black. A long pause. Then, one final line, spoken, not written. The warrior isn't born in war. He's forged in the decision to no longer sleep through life. End.